Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Beyond Train podcast. I am your host, Liev, and I'm so happy that you're here listening to this episode today. If you are new around here, consider subscribing or following the show. If you like what we do here, make sure to comment, subscribe, leave a rating or a review. Sharing is always the best way to help support us. If you would like to support us further, you should consider joining the Beyond Terrain Academy. First and foremost, it is free to join. You do gain access to terrain fundamentals classroom, as well as an introductory course on the true root causes of disease. However, if you do want to go deeper, you can join as a full member to gain access to some exclusive content. Monthly master classes, the Terrain Wellness Club with Jacob Diaz and Alex Zeck, myself, of course. Q&A and discussions, the Terrain Studies Library, deep dive classrooms, things on parasites, lifestyle, movement, etc. You gain access to so much more. A truly unified community, walking along the same path, and some really, really cool discussions. If you pay for the year, you do gain access to a complimentary Catalyst consultation to launch yourself into your terrain-based healing journey, as well as a year-end check-in. Regardless, you should go and join the community because it is free to join and there are tons of free resources. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Welcome, Evan, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, super excited to be here and jump into all different kinds of topics of conversation. So I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. I like to start the podcast episode off with a little introductory question. Take it any way that you'd like. I'd like to get a little definition of health, what health means to you. And, you can take it from a movement perspective, what healthy movement looks like. Anything that kind of resonates, just let it go. So what is health?
I guess for me, the way I like to think of health is one word that comes to my mind is sovereignty. I did a YouTube video on this in the past about movement sovereignty, but I think ultimately that's what health comes back to in general. If you have that sovereign ruling over your health and you can make decisions in the most informed way possible for you that you know are best for you, or at least think that are best for you, then I think that's ultimately where health starts. Because otherwise you're probably just like following along and doing what someone else tells you to do without really stopping to question. So I think all of that for me was like born from this idea of movement and getting out of pain. It only really started, and it only really started to feel like, wow, I'm actually really getting to a different place when I said, okay, it needs to be me that makes the decisions. Why do I need to depend on somebody else to tell me or fix me or anything like that? So um, I think health, in to a large degree, yeah, it's like sovereignty. You need to
Mhm.
connect with your own body and understand what it is that is best for you and what you need.
Really cool, man. Yeah, I love that answer. I mean, I think that's the way to kind of get the longevity aspect of health too, right? Like it's sustainable when it's coming from within, when it's coming from, something deeper inside of you, right? Like when you're just
Mm,
constantly doing what you're told and what other people do and what you see on Instagram or whatever, right? Like you can get some good
mm,
info from other people, but at the end of the day, it's got to come from within, right? And I think that's what really allows us to have that longevity, right? Because you're going to get fed up at one point, even if it's unconscious, right? But then it'll manifest in different ways and it'll come out and, negative thought
mm,
patterns, maybe it does come out physically or
mm,
stagnation in your movement patterns. I really like that. That health kind of comes from within, right? You got to kind of tune in
mm,
with
mm.
something a little bit greater, with something inside you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the important thing you touched on there was the longevity, because I see it all the time with people that I work with, because it's the large population of people I work with are trying to resolve some kind of issue. Generally, it's got
Mm,
to do with like physical pain within their body. Um, and most people who come to work with me have been like they've been around the loop, and they've got out of pain at one point and then it came back, and then maybe they haven't been able to get out of pain, and they go around in this endless loop. And it's a big common thing I see is that they go to work with someone and it either doesn't work or it kind of works for a little bit, but they haven't actually really understood why it's working and what the issue actually is. They've just been
mm,
following what someone says, and then when they like lose that support or they lose that influence, it's like they're back to square one. They don't know what to do. And I think you touched on it there. Like, I mean, one thing that came to my mind was like, if someone was to ask me like, what do I do to stay healthy, like I probably wouldn't be able to answer, because like, this week I do this and I feel something else next week, and I just do what makes me feel good. And if
Yeah.
I'm like going through the week and I start to feel tired and groggy and slow or whatever, it's like, right, let's have a look at what things maybe I should be doing that I'm not doing, or vice versa. And it's a constant kind of ebb and flow. It's not like you just have the one way and you're set now for the next 60 years, 70 years.
Yeah.
You need to bring that
Really cool.
awareness.
Really cool, man. Yeah, I love that. I think that like the movement as kind of analogy is so helpful when you're talking about health, or it's all connected at the end of the day, but just that this idea of continuously adapting to your life, to the new environments that are coming, they're not going to be 2 weeks in your life that are the same.
Mm,
So kind of having the ability to flow with that, to adapt to that, right? And not get stuck in old patterns and stuck in stagnant movement patterns, right? You got to be able to adapt to the new environment. And so I feel like one thing that really stuck out to me with kind of your philosophy and approach towards movement was there was this like you got to just be able to get up and move. You don't want to be able you don't have to like you don't want to be stuck in any movement. You don't want your movement to hold you back at all. You don't want to
mhm,
have any pain, or even if you like the whole idea of like warming up, needing to warm up for like, 15, 20 minutes before you start moving. Like that's not something that we've done. Like that's not something our ancestors did. They just started sprinting, they just started running, they
mm,
just started climbing. They didn't have to warm up before they were climbing a tree, because if they didn't, they would just, tense up and have all this
mhm,
pain. Um, so I think that's kind of an interesting way to take it, like, and relating to pain, that's something I really wanted to talk about. This idea that you were touching on, you go and you see someone and you might get out of pain temporarily. I'm curious, like if sometimes these, like going to see someone, certain types of interventions could be like just suppressing the symptoms and not addressing the root cause of things. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
we love to talk about the root cause here. Like, what's the root cause of our health problems when it comes to movement? Like, what does that root cause generally look like? And I'm sure it's always different, and it's always,
Mm,
it's very individual. But like, I'm curious if you have any patterns that you see, like whether it's not the muscle itself, if it's the tendon, if it's the bones, movement, structure, the
mm.
ability to flow and adapt. I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, generally when it comes to that, like getting to a root cause, one kind of phrase I always use with people, and because not because I just want to use the phrase, but I find myself coming back to it from like assessments that I do with people, is the issue has generally been called like it's a movement related issue. And when I say that to people, it's not always necessarily because, yeah, like, this muscle or this ligament or this bone is like not strong enough. It's like your body is using a strategy to move based on kind of
Mm,
based on so many things. It can be injuries, it can be your lifestyle, but your body is essentially moving in such a way, and using strategies to move throughout the world that are leading to this thing happening. So if someone has knee pain, for example, more 9 times out of 10 for a lot of people, unless they've had like an acute injury to that knee in recent times, the issue is probably coming from the fact that other parts of their body are using suboptimal strategies, and now the knee is having to somehow take up the slack for that. That's a very broad kind of example, but generally that's what it is. It's people's strategies for moving. And generally people don't really like to like peel the layers back and go back to what's
mm,
causing this, because it maybe takes a little longer sometimes, or maybe it involves doing some boring exercises that no one's ever seen before. But ultimately these are the things that will get you out of pain. And you want the structure to be moving in the way that it should, and then things like your muscles and the tissues around it will start to adapt and do what they're supposed to do. Because ultimately, from my experience and from what I see, it comes back to how are the joints moving and coordinating together, and then everything else kind of reacts as a byproduct of that.
yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a complex thing too, because I feel like, you know, kind of the cause might shift a little bit over time. Like kind of what I'm thinking about is I broke my humerus playing hockey when I was like 17, right? And
Mm,
snapped it clean in half. And fortunately, I didn't get surgery or anything. It just kind of hung there, and the bone literally fused back together. Like kind of the
mm,
most amazing thing ever, right? Obviously, I was in a cast, and I was kind of like, had my arm across, and um, I didn't move it for 6 months. So one, the most amazing thing that I saw was not moving it for, sorry, 6 weeks only. My arm shrunk. It was just pretty much skin and bone. I had
mm,
no movement, no ability to even move my elbow up and down because I didn't move it for 6 weeks. It was amazing. It almost felt like it was
mm.
like ready to just perish. Now like kind of in my own experience trying to search for that root cause of, now I have all these shoulder imbalances, and it's gotten a lot better over time, of course, and um trying to flow into more natural movement patterns has been the most helpful for it all. But it kind of felt like things were shifting, where obviously the probably the root of it was the break, but eventually the break healed itself, and then it
Mm.
kind of shifted into a shoulder and then maybe a spine issue or something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting how it can kind of move and flow, and it's kind of the body adapting to its situation, like you were kind of talking about there.
Yeah, yeah, and for a lot of people, what you'll actually find is people who have developed like some kind of chronic pain that they can't really seem to get rid of. What I see a lot with people is they've had an injury like what you've had, like they've broken a bone or they've dislocated a joint or a
Mhm.
tear in a ligament, and they say, yeah, I like, I had my surgery or I just did my rehab, whatever was required at the time, and yeah, everything was kind of fine since. And now, like just these last like 3 years, my hip is in so much pain. And the big thing I see is that when it's like it's this local approach again, if someone injures their knee, I'll always 9 times out of 10 see that they weren't actually re-educated on how to start loading that leg again. It's like, yeah, they made their
Mm.
knees strong and their quad strong, but also they never really taught their body how to reintegrate that now with their hip, with their foot, with like when they actually move throughout the world. So like what you've kind of mentioned, when you have an injury or a surgery or anything like this, that's an insult to the body. And the
Mhm.
body will adapt almost always in reaction to that. Now, that can happen in different ways and to different degrees. But ultimately, if you have an injury, even if it's just you like stub your toe against the wall, it's like there's something happens in your body that it goes into like that protective mode. And if you're not kind of conscious of, okay, I need to heal the pain, but also I need to make sure that my body actually remembers that it needs to load onto this leg or it needs to be able to like move my arm in a certain way. If I don't really
Mm.
re-educate that, then the body's not just going to bring it back. It's still like living in the past. It's still trying to protect you from that injury that happened, that you've never really taught it to say, look, it's okay, it's fixed. We need to be able to do this again and move in this way again. And that's like a huge thing. And again, like these movement related issues that I tell people, like that's a really good example of how that tends to show up. Someone's had a previous like traumatic injury where it was like so they can remember a moment when this thing happened, and they're like, yeah, I did all the things and I'm fine, but now I just have this back pain for the last 10 years, you know.
Yeah.
And generally, it's like that. It's the strategies that your body moves. And you can be sure if you have an injury, your body will do something to avoid loading that area or using that area
Mhm.
for a period of time. And then that just develops into a pattern that your body uses.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also this idea too, like we're told like rice, right? Whenever you
Mm.
rest, ice, uh C, I don't know what the C stands for, I forget, but elevation,
Compression.
unloading it, right? Like
Yeah.
and not putting any pressure on it, and not, and there's probably a, certain amount that's going to be healthy for healing, but there has to be a point where we do reintroduce that, right? So like our mentality is always to support or like modify or make things comfort
Hmm.
easier, and we're not reintroducing that kind of discomfort, that
Yeah.
pressure, that force that we need to continue growing, coming back. Back to kind of my example, just to highlight kind of what you were talking about there is like I went through the physio. I did my physio. Amazingly, I only did physio for one arm. So even though
Mm,
I broke this arm, I probably should have been training a more balanced way. So now this range of motion is completely different than my other like shoulder. And again, like it's balancing out now that I'm doing whole integrated movements rather than
mhm,
just trying to isolate each muscle and, each even one arm at a time, rather than now I'm like introducing the crawling and the, different movement patterns like that, even
mhm,
climbing, different stuff like that. It trains the body holistically rather than just that one area. And
mhm,
so the problems for me were the absolute worst when I was doing physio type exercises, very isolated, very unilateral, stagnant movements. And I was going to the gym and I was doing the same kind of, bodybuilding, hypertrophy, little bit of maybe powerlifting stuff, but it was all very isolated. Everything was so isolated. I never did,
mhm.
I play sports now, but I didn't play sports for a while. Like it was a few years. And so even sports, you're getting that whole body integration, and again, that's what's so cool about your practice is that you're not doing any bicep curls there on Instagram. You're kind of, it's always the whole body. It's always integrating every single thing and the flow of the body itself. Can you speak a
Mm.
little bit more to that? Because I think that's what's absolutely necessary in any movement practice, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that a big thing that forms a huge part of how we look at things in terms of movement is your body doesn't know that it's in the gym. It doesn't know that it's in a fight, that it's on the pitch in a game. But ultimately, you're demanding something of your body. You're asking it to like be able to perform a task. Like I'm going to
Mhm.
get up, I'm going to walk to the kitchen, and I'm going to make dinner. And your body will, for most people, hopefully that's not like a big stress, but like it's a task you're asking your body to do, and it needs to move and
Mhm.
perform certain movements to be able to do that. So giving your body these kinds of tasks and allowing it to do it in the most efficient way possible ultimately is what will serve you best in the long run, because our bodies are about efficiency. We want to conserve energy. We want to be able to like use energy in an efficient way for as long as possible. And yeah, if you go into like the gym and you're just like there and you're just doing this, or you're just doing like this kind of movement, it does have its place and it does serve its purpose. But the where I start to question it a little bit more is like, okay, at what point do you need to either maybe do less of that, or do you need to integrate something different, like you mentioned, crawling, something a little bit different that gets your body just to perform a task. And there's probably an element of like a subconscious element of like, if you say, right, I'm just going to get this weight and my only thing is I need to lift this over my head in the most efficient way, versus I need to like make sure my shoulder blades are down and I'm like up against the bench here and then I strictly press. um think of real life scenarios. Is that going to serve you in the long run, particularly if that way of training is something that you just do over and over again? So the whole thing of like when I do a bicep curl, for example, like sometimes I'll tend to like I'll lift more weight than I can lift and just tell my body, right, if I want to curl this weight up, get it up there like in any way you can. So it integrates like a push through the floor or a turn in my body, or it brings my lat into it or my hip or something. So I'm asking my body to perform tasks, and that's a huge thing that we do with people, especially when people are in pain or maybe their movement in certain positions has been inhibited. We'll like we won't say always just say like, right, we're going to do this movement, this is like the form points, you need to tick them off. It's like, no, right, go into like this kind of position now, just reach for that thing on the floor over there. And we give them tasks because the body then adapts and moves into certain positions when we kind of let go a little bit and say, okay, how are you going to reach and pick that thing in the most efficient way possible that doesn't cause pain? And
Mhm.
you know isolation has its place, but it doesn't serve these tasks that our body essentially and our nervous system is kind of wired to do. When you're on the pitch, it's like my task is to run and do whatever then the game demands of me. But bicep curls and these type of exercises, these real isolated exercises, they may not best serve you. Doesn't mean they can't actually play a part in somehow improving your performance, but ultimately you need to have that balance between okay, if I'm asking my body to move in certain ways in my life, but how I actually really train it and load it with a lot of external load is completely different, then maybe you're going to have
Mm,
some problems. So for
mm.
us, what we do here, like, yeah, integration is hugely important, and isolation type stuff has its place. But ultimately, where we're trying to bridge the gap is to say, right, when is enough, or when is like maybe an integration of both required versus
Mm.
just, the isolation and the aesthetics and all these kinds of things, particularly if
I
someone's in
guess
pain.
sure, sure. I guess it partly depends on kind of your goals too, right? Like, you know,
Hmm.
not to demonize anyone's, specific interest or whatever, right? Like, that's kind of half the point too. Whatever you're
Hmm.
interested in, you know, that's what you should do. If you love to do
Yeah,
it, there's
yeah.
something to say about that too, right? Like, I've been loving golf lately. Is golf, the best thing for the body? I mean, you're kind of only swinging one way, right? So like
Mm.
actually like it's been kind of interesting for me to try to balance that out, and try to get that same action going the other way so I can keep that flow and natural balance of the body itself. Because there's a lot of common injuries when it comes to kind of doing that one motion. And I think the motion's kind of interesting because it's certainly not an isolated motion, but you're kind of
Hmm.
isolating out that one side of the body, which is
Yeah.
interesting to think about. So even just having, these ideas in the back of your mind when you are doing the things that bring you joy and what you love,
Hmm.
is kind of really good. Like maybe, bodybuilding is a little bit hard on the body when you're constantly doing isolated hypertrophy, but kind of integrating this functionality into that, right?
Hmm.
To
Hmm.
again come back to that longevity, right? Because we don't obviously don't want to get injured and end the career early, because that's where the balance comes in. Where it's like
Absolutely.
if you love it, you want to do it for a long time too. You don't want to have to give it up because of an injury or because of pain or
Yeah.
because of whatever,
Yeah.
right? So yeah,
Yeah,
really
and
cool, man.
that's ultimately what it's about. Like it's like our whole like philosophy and approach is, most people, like, if someone's suffering from pain, most likely, because I've been through this myself, most likely it's about much more than just like a painful shoulder or the back pain or whatever. It's like that's the thing that's like always there, but more than likely that's having a negative impact on your life in some form, be it your
Mm,
relationships, be it your mental health, be it it's because you can't go out and take a run in the park for half an hour once a week, and that's what really like lights you up. Like, their life has been impacted in some way, and ultimately what we're about is, you just need to do what you need to do to get yourself to be able to do the things that bring you joy, and then do that sustainably for the rest of your life. So yeah, if someone's goal is that they want to build a ton of muscle and like look like a bodybuilder, then like by all means, like I really don't tell people not to do it. Just understand that if you start breaking down and have pain, maybe don't be so surprised why. Just the same way as if someone just like, I just like to walk for an hour or like half an hour each day. It's like, that's fine. But then if you do want to go hike a mountain, or you do want to like do something more higher impact, don't be surprised when your knee blows out or whatever it is that's going to happen.
yeah.
Um, and that's ultimately it. What is it you want your body to be able to do every day? How do you want it to be able to feel? Then,
Mm,
do the things that are necessary. And that's ultimately it. We're not about, we're not like muscle building coaches in what we do. We're not rehab coaches in what we do. Like, we're not about one outcome. We're about whatever outcome it is that you want, and seeing what it is that's stopping you from that, and then helping you get back to that. And ultimately, yeah, it's helping the people resolve pain in our case. But ultimately, it's like we're asking, what's the problem and what is it you want to be able to do, and now let's fill in the space in between, and map out that way to allow you to do that.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, again, we kind of see the parallel there, like with just health in general, like it's
Mm.
like
Yeah.
kind of just a little microcosm of the exact same thing, the exact same process, really well laid out. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, the Ancestral Athlete, that's your handle there. I'm curious
Mm.
how that came about, how ancestral movement inspires your philosophy, how that name came about, because I love studying like the primitive indigenous populations and their movement patterns. I think it's kind of the gold standard, you know? So
Mm.
just kind of curious on how that came about.
Yeah, I think at the time it was I was kind of down that rabbit hole as well of like ancestral health, and at the time, yeah, primarily I was like doing a lot of looking into nutrition and different aspects of health as well. But primarily at that time, I had been going through a lot of injuries and the traditional S&C, and I was involved in team sport like my whole life that kind of led to a lot of these injuries. So I was like, right, there must be a reason why this is happening, and this can't be the way that it's like supposed to be. And I went down that rabbit hole, and it was probably from the perspective of health in general, not so necessarily heavily focused on ancestral movement. But one thing that did really kind of resonate with me when I heard it and came across it is like, yeah, look, we're just our history and our ancestors were not designed to like sit in a car all day or sit at a desk all day. It's just we're doing things now that just is so different, and something about it just clicked. Um, and I was like, we just need to get back to more of like even a little bit closer to what it may have been like, or the kind of things our body expects on a daily basis. And I think at that time, the ancestral athlete was about I was trying to pull myself back from that place of like injury and feeling like, okay, well, my body is just completely working against me here. And I guess the ancestral athlete was more trying to build like the perfect athlete, but for me it's more about the human. I have this kind of like phrase that I've like spoken about on a lot of other podcasts in the past, where every athlete is a human and every human is an athlete. And the one I think people understand is every human is an athlete. They're like, oh yeah, I can be an athlete, but people don't understand that every athlete is a human, firstly.
Mm.
And a lot of people are trying to optimize the athlete when the human is like they haven't nailed the basics of just being human, from like nutrition, movement, all these various aspects of health. But yet we were trying to like put extra 5 kg on our squats and improve our power output and all this stuff, when people were actually just breaking down with injuries doing that. So for me, it was kind of like getting back to being a little bit more human first before you actually become this like high level, like polished athlete. For me, people were actually like completely missing just the foundations. People are not nailing that. They sit at a desk for 10 hours and then they expect they're going to go to the gym and like perform like a professional athlete. And
Mm.
it may work for a while, but ultimately it's probably going to result in some kind of issue somewhere. And that's kind of where it came from.
I hope that you guys are enjoying the episode so far, and if you are, you will love the Beyond Terrain Academy. I've taken everything that I've learned from studying the terrain, speaking with the greatest minds in the terrain field, and have distilled it down to the fundamentals, easily digestible content and material, as well as a place to go even deeper and more specific into the terrain as well. Becoming a full Academy member gives you access to monthly masterclasses, the Terrain Wellness Club, the Terrain Studies Library, Q&A and discussions, as well as deep dive classrooms in things like parasites, movement, terrain lifestyle factors, as well as a space for reflection. There is so much available in the Beyond Terrain Academy. And don't forget, you can pay for the entire year to gain access to that Catalyst consultation to launch you into your healing journey, as well as a year in check-in to ensure that you've been putting into practice the terrain principles to keep you accountable. But let's get back to the episode. Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said about like a lifestyle shift when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
thinking about healthier movement, health in general, right? Like it's not like it's really tough to kind of spend that hour a day, a couple hours a week to then like become healthy or become, have healthy movements. What are
Yeah.
some kind of lifestyle shifts that helped you kind of achieve that? Like what were the things that you could do in your daily life, rather than maybe taking the elevator or, walking or whatever it is? I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
curious.
Yeah, so I guess for me at the beginning, it was literally just trying to input more movement into my day and realizing
Mm,
that even though I have a desk job, or at the time I had a job that required a lot of driving, I was doing a lot of like service work all around the country. I was like, I don't actually have to sit here for 8 hours straight or 4 hours straight. I can like sit here for 10 minutes and I can get up and then come back. So like kind of seeing these little pockets, and this is kind of like the sovereignty thing that we talked about at the start. It was like I could make that
Yeah.
decision for myself, and I actually heard this from the Foot Collective. I'm not sure they're actually Canadian originally.
Mm.
I heard it first from them where they were like, nobody is like legally allowed to tell you you have to sit for 8 hours. All right, and I think what they were talking about as well was like, um, I think they were talking about like standing desks. It's like like your employer can't refuse to like provide a standing desk if that's something that you like ask for. And it was like these things. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, like I mean, there's so many things I'm doing just because I think I have to, and someone else is telling me I have to, but I don't actually have to do that. And ultimately, for me, it was like it was a lifestyle shift, but it was more the mindset shift of, okay, well, if I'm prioritizing my health, then I really have to say that, well, screw everyone else. My health has to be the most important thing to me. And if someone's trying to make me do something and tell me I can't do something that's going to help me better my health, then no, I'm sorry, I'm not in. Like I'm making the decision for myself. So it was kind of like probably not even like a rebellion, but I had this like inner thing where I was like, yeah, I'm going to rebel against like these people who tell me I can't do these things. And um, it was a huge driver for me in what I'm doing right now, because I was like, yeah, I don't want to go driving a car for whatever amount of hours every day and come home and
Mm.
feel stiff and tired. It's like I want to have like autonomy over my day. I want to be able to move. I want to be able to do all the things that I know that are going to help keep and make me healthy, um,
Mm.
and give me that freedom to be able to make those decisions. So for me, it was the mindset shift and realizing nobody can actually tell you like what you have to do, particularly like that when it comes to your health. And I think most
Mm.
people have never really stopped to ask themselves that question. It's like, yeah, I always hear this thing about sitting for 10 hours a day, but I never realized that I don't actually have to do that. And, ultimately it's as simple as that. And it's more like it's that aha moment. And once you get that breakthrough, now you start to see the world very, very differently and start to do things very differently.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that can also be like the hardest part, right? To have that kind of paradigm shift in your
Yeah.
mentality,
Yeah.
like
And this is,
like
yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Now this is the thing, like online, like that. It's like it's frustrating to see sometimes. Like people are always talking about like, is this the best exercise for this? And if you want to actually really get your glutes, you have to do it in this position, and with this machine. I'm like, you're completely missing the conversation. Like I understand the value of it, and people are like specializing in these areas, but ultimately, most of the people who are listening to you, like they're actually like they're probably just trying to find a workaround because they can't do a different variation because they have pain. Like ultimately, we're
Mm.
missing the fact that people are not realizing that it's not what you're doing in the gym is the main problem. It can be part of it for sure, but it's like if you're not fixing the fact that you're just not moving for the whole day, and that happens, 5 6 days a week, or you never go outside and get some sunshine. It's like these are the problems, like really. And the arguments about whose system is better, and all, like it's probably a lot of people like who think they're leaders in the space and have big egos and they want to be right. Like it's ultimately like I just think the conversation's completely like missing the what people are actually struggling with. People are not struggling because they're doing someone else's system over yours. It's like they're missing something far more fundamental. That's my
Really
rant.
cool, man. I love that. No, I love that. I'm glad I'm glad you said that, dude. That's so good. Yeah, I remember, like a few of the guests that I've had on when we've been kind of discussing movement and even resting, like it, it's like one of the themes that keeps coming up is the next position is the best one. So,
Mm,
like when you're sitting around, like, yeah, it's okay to sit, but like that's one of the things that floor sitting is so amazing is because you're constantly looking for that next position. You're moving around, rather than being on the couch and kind of sinking into it and you're not
mm,
moving.
mm-hmm.
Like you might adjust from one butt cheek to the other because it's falling asleep, but like, you're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
getting that like little tidbits of movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the next movement is really important when it comes to resting positions. And yeah, like when it comes to like my training now, like it's so much more creative and free flowing, whereas
Mm.
it used to be that stagnant, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is this day, Tuesday, Thursday is this day, Saturday, Sunday is this day, sprinkle in a few rests. But it was like kind of that same, there was no movement even in my movement,
Mm.
and it
Mm.
was the same lifestyle wise. There was no movement in my lifestyle. It was,
Mm-hmm.
you go from the bed in the morning to the toilet to the table to the, to work
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to the couch,
Yeah, yeah.
and there's car in between.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible, yeah. And another thing is like people will really underestimate how little they're moving. They think they're moving more than they actually are in a day. Um,
Mm,
and again, it all comes back to that awareness, and like you say, if you're getting to that point where when you go to the gym or you're doing like your training, you're actually coming with that like exploratory approach or the curiosity. I think ultimately, if you can be at that point and you're feeling good in your body and like you're still, feeling strong, like that's a really good place to be. Because
mm,
like I'm quite similar. I don't follow a program now. I'm just kind of giving my body what I feel it needs, and like largely my sessions, I'm like hitting the same basis every single session, but I'm just doing it with a different type of movement or a different way of loading. And this is the problem. I posted a video on my story yesterday of me doing these like landmine kind of lateral lunges, and I got a reply saying like why do it in this position? Like what's this doing? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just I'm just hinging. I'm loading my hip like I did in my last session. I'm just doing it differently now.
yeah.
And like there is a reason. And if someone's in pain, yes, we can, maybe one variation is better than another. But ultimately, the thing that I guess like this is more of like a personal problem like that I need to just deal with is like I get frustrated when people ask these questions because I'm like, why are you not asking maybe what pattern is this improving, or like like what is your intent here? So like why would I do this variation? It's like, I don't know, like you can use a dumbbell, you can use a kettlebell, a barbell, I don't care. Like I'm just trying to drive a particular movement pattern, I guess. And
Mm,
but that's the thing. It's like people could look at my training and say, "Wow, there's no structure or there's so much variety." But ultimately, every session, I'm loading my hips and I'm practicing my hinge pattern. Sometimes I'm doing it. I hold weight in two hands. Sometimes in one. Sometimes it's one leg at a time. Sometimes both legs together. But it's the same patterns, basic patterns that I'm just reinforcing and strengthening and putting some variety behind. Um, and for me, that's what my training like really consists of, like just giving my body exposure in different ways. But ultimately, I'm training the same qualities, and I feel pretty good. My
mm,
body's moving pretty well, so it's a pretty
yeah.
good place to be. And that's again the sovereignty. When you're in the pain and when you're trying to follow like this system and this guy says this, you're trapped now because what you don't know how to go outside of that. You have to follow the system and you have to follow, whatever these like strict rules that someone has created. And you lose
Mm,
that ability to ultimately come back and say, well, what's best for my body and what makes it feel good.
love it. Really cool. Yeah, half of it is like trying to figure out what the right question is to ask, right? Like
Mm,
what am I trying to figure out here? And I think that curiosity piece, like you were saying, is fundamental to the sovereignty, to the health, to the freedom, right? Like just retaining that curiosity, because curiosity
mm,
is not something that we have to discover, it's something that you have to rediscover, because
mm,
as kids we're all so curious, and when you look at children, man, they'll move like any which way, doesn't matter, they're resilient and they can move and hang and climb and throw and whatever, like it's just innate, it's within us. And I feel like that's part of movement too. It's not like discovering, it's rediscovering, what we
mm-hmm,
once had. And that comes through kind of rediscovering that curiosity and trying to figure out, like, you know,
mm-hmm.
what's the point? What's the
Yeah.
meaning behind this? Looking a little bit deeper.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing. Like when it comes to pain as well, like when you get pain, you should be curious and say, okay, why is this happening? And then what happens if I do this? And what happens if I turn my body this way? But most people's reaction is, oh, I better get that number for the physio and have them fix me. Like, whereas,
Mm.
like, I could wake up tomorrow morning and say, like, yeah, that left hip feels like it's a little stiff. And I'm like, right, let's try, like, load it this way and I'll stretch into it in a certain position or do some kind of like a hinge pattern. I'm like, oh yeah, if I actually turn that way and load through there, it opens it up and things are feeling good again and problem solved,
Mm.
and maybe like I'll look at, strengthening a couple of things that might need it over the next few weeks. But ultimately it's it's how you relate to it. And if kind of some kind of stiffness or discomfort or curiosity or stiffness or discomfort, like I guess primarily it should spark the curiosity and say, I wonder why it's happening. Is it
Yeah.
because of something I'm doing, or is there something else going on? But yeah, we always try to just straight away, I'll outsource this and have someone fix me. And then that doesn't work, and now you're slipping now, and it starts to become chronic.
Mm.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't seek some help, but the big thing that I always encourage people is, if you're going to come work with me, or anyone like in our side of things, like come with, like, I want to learn from this person so that I don't leave at the end of all this and maybe my issue kind of gets fixed, but I have no idea what happened, why it was happening in the first place. Come away saying, like, I know why it happened, and if it happens again, I've got it. And that's ultimately what we like. Anyone who works with us or comes into our sphere, is we want them to at least have some kind of understanding as to where it may be coming from,
Mhm.
and what helps to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I can totally relate to that, like it's the intention, like
Mm.
I've worked with tons of people. I bounced around from physio to physio because things just weren't getting better,
Hmm.
and I tried out different modalities and different people and different whatever, but I had the wrong intention. It was like that intention of magic bullet. Come on, let's like fix it and let's
Hmm.
move on. And there was no responsibility, there was no sovereignty in that. It was just doing as I was told. And then, throughout this, my whole journey, obviously, like I was kind of coming into this mentality of like, all right, it's time to kind of take some responsibility for myself and figure it out. And then yeah, going and working with people now, it's like, I'm working with people.
Mm.
Like I'm
Hmm.
not going to see someone and they're going to work on me. Like I'm going to
Hmm.
go and work with them with
Yeah.
whatever I do. Like I want to learn, I want to know what's going on. What are you doing? And it's something like
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
in there and I don't know if I'm annoying or whatever, but I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, why
Yeah.
you do that? Why is this? Why is that?" I'm always asking like that why why are we doing this? Even in
Hmm.
like yeah, anyways, anything that I do now, I'm like asking that, which I think is a powerful way to learn, right? Because these people like they're you want to build that relationship of, you know, they might have like yourself, you'll have the expertise, you have the expertise in movement and movement patterns, but at the end of the day, the individual, they're the expert of themselves, like
Hmm.
they got to know what's going on in their body. There's no one else can know that, like
Yeah.
it has to be that working relationship, which I think is amazing. And you embody that so well. So that's really cool, man. That's really cool. I'm
Yeah. It's
kind of
cool. It's
curious.
cool. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead there before we move on, please.
No, yeah, yeah, no, it's nice to hear that. And the one thing I always encourage for people, people have actually commented on this a little bit in some of the content. It's like, I'll tell people, like, okay, like this, do this move, and here's some of the key things to focus on. But I always kind of finish with, but ultimately you need to play around in this position and see what feels best, or what line of tension or what position feels best. Because again, it's like, right, we'll kind of we'll give you the roadmap to get there, but now once you're there, you need to really find that way.
Mm,
And again, it's like what you said. It's kind of another level of just saying, yeah, be a little bit more invested in the process and not just do what I say. Basically, like you need to have
mm.
some awareness.
Kind of the last, like, there's two kind of last things that I want to touch on before we kind of wrap things up here. One was like the role of fascia. What role, like, how does that inspire your training? Because that's something that really like piques my curiosity. I don't know
Mm,
really enough about it, but it's kind of like that underlying flow of the body, right? It's not that it's like something that usually people don't consider in movement. Like we think about our muscles, our ligaments, and our bones and our structure, but we kind of forget about that, like the entirety of the body itself and the
Hmm.
way that it flows, like each muscle. Like I remember I used to hit back and biceps at the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
time because I was like, oh yeah, like I'm pulling. And then eventually, actually, kind of interestingly, I was like, you know what? I want to hit back and triceps because they're like connected to one
Hmm.
another. And which was kind of an interesting way I took my training and part of that curiosity piece. But yeah, just kind of curious on that role, like that role of fascia and how that inspires your training and movement in general.
Yeah, the fascia is something I've kind of like dove in and out of at various stages. Um, Ultimately, it's not something that forms the real kind of core of how we approach things. We do like myofascial work with people, as in we'll have them do like myofascial releases and like self myofascial releases, because I do think there's benefit in that. And I think the way or what I kind of call that in how I approach it with people is like we're just trying to improve some tissue quality. If you've got areas of your body that maybe over time is like, okay, you can't really, your body's ability to be able to move into these areas and use these tissues has been inhibited for one reason or another. So using like a tool like a lacrosse ball or something like this, where we can actually get into the tissue, stimulate it a little bit, bring some hydration, some blood flow, just kind of change the properties of that, let's call it stagnant tissue. Then maybe when we go to do like some of our movements and some of the things afterwards, maybe we're just going to open up some more opportunity now to start bringing that back online. Um, that's one of the bigger ways in which I would kind of use some of those things from the fascia world. As regards like the fascial lines and fascial change or chains, again, I think it's kind of like one way of looking at the body. It's like anything; they're all everything is it's a tool, and how you use it will kind of determine, I guess,
Mm,
where you go with it. But again, I think just fascia is. I think there's a lot of evidence out there that people can benefit from that approach to their training,
mm,
but then people can also benefit hugely. And the kind of way I look at it is more like, what are the bones doing and the joint positions?
yeah.
Because it's like if you imagine the skeleton, the bones and the joint capsules, this is like the deepest layer of your body from a movement perspective. It's kind of where
Mm,
it's originating from. I can't move my elbow without the joint moving at that very deep level, and then the
mhm,
tissues around that respond and react, and um, it's almost like the tissues won't have anything to do if the bones don't move, so they kind of respond to the joint position, and it's joint positions that triggers the muscles to do whatever it is that they need to do. So um, yeah, the fascia stuff is something I'm not like super deep in, and it's definitely not a huge
mhm,
part of my practice, and how we go about things. But I would say a lot of those fascial lines that people talk about, they're basically just movement patterns. Like if you talk about like this anterior oblique sling, or the the functional lines, the back superficial back line, a lot of this stuff is like if you just watch a person walk, it's like, yeah, they're, you can look at it to say, okay, they're like pronating their foot on this side, they're supinating on the other, they're internally rotating here, externally rotating here. It's kind of very similar. It's just looking at it from a different lens.
mm,
So I guess like I'm after rambling now, but ultimately I would say that I'm not deep enough to have a real opinion on it. I do
mm.
think that there's a lot of value, and there can be a lot of value and benefit from it. But I think it's another one of those things that's like everything else in the fitness and rehab industry. It's causing more divide and more conflict than it is any kind of real answers and solutions. It's like it's just confusing people even more.
Yeah, well, I do really value that answer and your opinion there because yeah, it's not one you hear too often, and I think, the important thing is you mentioned it's tool.
Yeah.
right? Like it's a tool, way to view the body, but we don't want to engage in any sort of reduction. We don't want to kind of negate what we're seeing. Like, when like it kind of comes back to this whole philosophy you've been kind of presenting here today, like that tuning into the body and playing around in a position, trying to figure out what the right pattern is for you, kind of regardless of the theories that we have, like trying to tune into you as the individual. And maybe there is some sort of objective, best pattern, like ideal, perfect
Mm.
efficiency, but, whether that's achievable and whether or not any of us are there, and, even like, how are we going to determine that
Yeah.
100%?
Yeah.
Like we can know generally, but like perfect angles, like are we just reducing things? Are we just getting away from what's real, what's in front of us, and what is like individual about each and every one of our movement practices and each and every one of our health in
Hmm.
general? So
Yeah.
yeah, really, really cool perspective, man. I do appreciate that a lot. Before we kind of wrap things up here, is there anything you want to leave the listener with? Anything that you'd like to impart before I let you go here?
I guess the biggest thing, and we probably touched on a lot of the messages I would like people to kind of take and start to employ into their life. But I would say number one is, yeah, realize that you're like the boss. You know, you're the boss of your health and whatever that journey is for you. So don't just follow blindly, particularly when it comes to your health, because I think we've over the last couple of years in particular, people have found that out, that just following advice from people who they have some authority, but maybe not authority in the realm of health, and people just follow along. So number one is like you become your own boss and really make sure you're taking control of like the decisions that you make for your body as best you can. If you don't know the answers, take that like mindset when you come to talk to someone like me, for example, and like come with, I'm not the expert that's going to tell you everything. Come and ask me the questions. Find out for yourself like how much I can help
Mhm.
you, but don't just rely on me to give you everything either. Because I would be lying if I said I could do that for every person. You know, it's I think what I have the tools and I can like practically help you, but ultimately if you want the change you're looking for, then you need to take control of that for yourself. Um, and yeah, the other thing I would say is just from like a more like practical standpoint, really like looking at what's out there now, particularly online, is don't look for who's right because nobody's right. No, all these people who think they're right and they're not, and I'm not right either. I just have my tools. I'm trying to interpret them and use them as best I can, and I'm also trying to keep an open mind and round out my approach. But ultimately, like I have the same tool as someone else who like maybe identifies with a certain system has. They're just using a different brand of tool, and maybe they like what they've got is like they've got a more well-rounded tool, and maybe I'm missing things in my toolbox. But ultimately, like we're all trying to achieve the same thing, and the language we use, maybe the way we view the body can be different, but like especially those like systems, it's like they've just compiled knowledge into a different way of communicating it. But stop thinking that someone's right and wrong. um, just someone's going to be more right to suit your situation and will resonate with you more, then explore that. But yeah, this whole divide of like everyone says they're trying to help everyone get out of pain and this musculoskeletal problems, but ultimately they're just fighting among themselves and trying to like show who's the most right.
Yeah, well put, man. Well, I appreciate your humility, and I think that you embody what a true, practitioner looks like. A true teacher. That's what it comes down to, right? And
Mm.
so I really appreciate that, man. I think that's really important, and that's kind of people that I like to have on this show. So I really, really do appreciate you coming on. Where can the listener find your work? Can they support you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so best place to start is Instagram. That's probably our main channel. So it's at the.ancestral.athlete. So that's the best place. You'll kind of find links to everything from there. But we've got YouTube. We've got a new program that we launched recently, which is our 9-week corrective foundations. And that program is very different to anything we've done before. So that's essentially a lot of the things we've been talking about. This is about stripping movement back to like its foundations, peeling back the layers. But ultimately, the main goal of that program is to give you not just solutions and exercises and a step-by-step approach, but to try give you some knowledge. Try make sure that when you come away from that program, that this time next year you're not looking for another 9-week program. That you actually take the tools and say, I know if this happens again, I kind of have a pretty good idea how I'm going to deal with it. So that if anyone's kind of really wanting to get into our work or like somehow work with us in some capacity, that would be the best place to start. And again, you'll find all that through Instagram.
Amazing, brother. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate your time. It was great chatting with you. This was great. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
everything.
awesome. Yeah, really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, it was great to jump into all those things.
Great. All right, and I want to thank you all so much for listening. Before we wrap it up, we all need to remember that this is for informational purposes only, and this does not constitute medical or therapeutic advice and will not replace the advice from a qualified practitioner. But also remember this, that we are sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. We are self-healers, self-teachers, self-governable, and so much more. And together with each other and the greater forces, we can regain our natural vitality, meaning, clarity, purpose, and health. I do really appreciate you all for taking the time to listen to the podcast today. If you want to support what we do, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, leave a rating or a review, and follow the show. Sharing is the extra step. Let a few people know about the podcast. And if you do want to go deeper and you do want to deeply support what we do here at Beyond Train, join the Beyond Train Academy. There is a ton of value in there available for you all. There is free resources as well, so do not miss out on those. If you have any questions, criticisms, comments, concerns, please reach out to me. Instagram is a great way to do that. Email works as well. But just remember, there are two types of people in the world: those who believe they can, those who believe they can't, and they are both correct. Thank you all for listening. Take care.